Hi, this is Samuel Stokes from SamuelStokesMusic.com, and I'm on here because on my Facebook page for SamuelStokesMusic.com I share a lot of memes, and often people ask what they mean, or people ask what some of them mean, because I share memes on all kinds of different music, and a lot of people don't know certain types of music and don't understand some of these jokes. So I'm just going to go through and do a quick explanation. Some of these you might know, some of these you might not know. So we'll start with the end of last year. So I'm going to start with the end of last year and then go through January of this year. I was thinking I might do this about once a month, just explain the memes from the previous month. So here's December 31st, 2022, New Year's Eve, and the final pun of the year says, "My last pun of 2022. I want to end the year on a high note, and then I want to give it a rest." And so as you see, there's this note, which is really high. That is a C7, 3 octaves above middle C, so it's a very high note. Violins can reach that note, it's very high. You might hear a piccolo playing that note. You can play it on a piano. It's actually the second highest C on the piano. C8 is the top note of the piano, and this is C7. So it's 1 octave below the top of the piano, but still very high. So it's a high note, and then this symbol to the right of it is a rest. So it's a nice little pun to end the year. By the way, I didn't make up any of these memes, I just repost them. So just explaining them. Okay, on January 2nd, I posted this one. It says, "This woman is accused of attacking her husband with several of his guitars. The judge asked, 'First offender?' She replied, 'No, first a Gibson, second offender.'" Alright, for those of you who don't play guitar, you may not know that Gibson and Fender are brand names of guitars. So first offender, no, first a Gibson, second offender. Ha 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 ha. Some of these are really corny. That's okay. On January 3rd, Eliza Jane, at Eliza Jane again, posted, "8-year-old singing quietly to himself. Dancing queen, young and sweet, only 7 teeth." Alright, so that should be only 17. That's from the song Dancing Queen by ABBA, a pop supergroup. Alright, January 4th. Let's see, this one says, "You know, Ernie, I can't help this feeling that I'm just another day older and deeper in debt." And that is a song by Tennessee Ernie Ford. 16 tons, you load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Right, so they're on the loading dock, loading a big giant 16-ton weight. I think in the song they're talking about loading 16 tons one thing at a time, not all at once. With a lift, would be much harder work. So, all right, let's move on to January 6th. So on January 6th, I posted this one that says, "4 great pianists of the 20th century." And yes, these are 4 great pianists of the 20th century. We have Donald Duck, Tom the Cat, Bugs Bunny, and Woody Woodpecker, all in these great piano scenes that they have on their cartoons. Actually, my favorite cartoon piano duel of all time was between Donald Duck and Daffy Duck on the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, one interesting thing you might notice about the Daffy Duck Donald Duck piano duo in Who Framed Roger Rabbit is that neither one of them wins the duel. That was the condition that the studios had on that, because they're from different studios, of course. Donald Duck is Disney, and the Looney Tunes, including Daffy Duck, that's Warner Brothers. And so in order for both of those companies to allow them to have the 2 ducks in a dueling piano scene, neither one of them was allowed to win the duel. And so at the end of the duel, instead of somebody being victorious, everything collapses, the whole stage falls apart, the pianos, I can't remember what happens, but anyway, it's a big disaster at the end, so there's really no conclusion as to who actually won the duel. But anyway, 4 great pianists of the 20th century right there. Alright, on January 7th, this lovely one. It says, what if, instead of In Excelsis Deo, we all went Shubip Dip Doo Wop? All right, or something like that. So, yeah, you have four, looks like, have monk costumes on of some kind, and who would be singing In Excelsis Deo, which means uh, God in heaven. It's usually with Gloria, Gloria in Excelsis Deo, glory to God in the highest or in heaven. And it says, what if instead of that we go shoo-bop dip doo-wop? Okay, so this guy obviously is dressed a little differently than the monks, and he's apparently in some sort of doo-wop group. Bust out some synth memes. Yeah, I have some somewhere. I post just about every music meme I find. I'm not real selective, so I don't know that I have any in this past month, but at some point I will have some. Okay, January 8th, this one says Claire Annette. This is Amanda Lynn. This one probably doesn't need much explanation, but this instrument over here is a clarinet on the left. I don't know if you can see my pointer on the screen. It's hard to tell. Anyway, the one on the left is a clarinet. It's a woodwind instrument, and the one on the right, this stringed instrument, is a mandolin. And so those names just happen to sound exactly like those instruments. All right, January 9th. This one, it's a bagpipe with Billie Eilish's face on it, and it says, I'm a bagpipe, instead of I'm a bad guy, right? As in the song. Okay, on January 12th, we have NIN, a ruler, and some guy standing there. Now, I put on their esoteric humor because you have to understand all of the references in order to understand what this means. Right? It is Niles Crane from the TV show Frasier, and it's Frasier's brother. And NIN is 9 Inch Nails, and so you see that this reaches up to 9 inches on the ruler, so this is a 9 Inch Niles instead of 9 Inch Nails. So, there you go. I didn't say they were funny jokes, they're just jokes. No, they're pretty funny, some of them. Okay, January 13th, I posted this one. Looks like the Pied Piper leading some rats out of the sewer, and it says, 4 years at Juilliard for this? And of course, Juilliard, you may or may not know, is a premier music school in New York City. And so I guess the implication here is that he spent all of his time studying how to be a great piper, and then now he's just using it for the practical purpose of exterminating mice. So, yeah, that happens sometimes. When you think about it, to be a good musician of any kind, to teach children or to play music in a church or anything like that, you tend to need to have more education than necessary. I mean, you have to be better than who you're either teaching or who you're performing for, otherwise it's not a special skill. So, funny enough, even though I don't think my music that I've used in my life has been quite on this level, it is true that you need more education. Just because you can get an A in a class doesn't mean that you're qualified to teach it. So your level of education has to be a little bit higher, usually, than what you need for a lot of the jobs. I can't tell you how many times I have, with 4 degrees in music, how many times I've sat in the corner and played music that nobody was really listening to at a banquet or at some sort of event. So there you go. You say you pose an argument. What's your argument there? Is it about this meme? Or am I missing something? Maybe you're referencing something there. No. Anyway, this is lovely. January 16th. This is apparently some sort of clip art or some sort of photo shoot. So what does it say? You may just have a niche understanding of something that you're trying to help someone more talented add to their skill base. Yeah, I mean, definitely it can work. Education can work from many different directions. With all my advanced training in music, I went through many years of college, getting different musical degrees. But I still learn things from my students. You know, it happens because you can have education that's a mile deep, but maybe it's only 100 meters wide or something. Whereas one of your students might have knowledge of some music or some artist that's 10 miles deep and you don't have any idea. I mean, they could uh, talk circles around you about certain types of music that you're not aware of. Nobody can know everything. Some people can know a lot, but nobody can know everything. So January 16th, I put how romantic on this. So in this, apparently it was a photo shoot, probably for some ad campaign or something. Who knows? I'm not sure what they're selling, or maybe it was just a clip art or whatever you call that photo that you can license to put in your print materials. Well, this girl seems to be really charmed by this guy's guitar playing, and if you look at where that is circled there with the yellow, his hand is on the headstock of the guitar, where he's not going to be able to actually make different notes with the strings because you have to press where the horizontal lines are, where the frets are on the fretboard. Otherwise, it's just going to be the open strings, which is not going to sound terrible. It's just not going to sound like music. It's just going to sound like somebody strumming an open guitar without actually changing any notes ever. So I don't know why this girl looks so impressed with him, but it's probably because it's just posed for a photo shoot. Yeah, I might be doing some little pizzicato on the. That's kind of an extended technique that some composers like to use, picking behind the what do they call that? The nut, I think, of the guitar, at the top of the fretboard. So makes a really pingy sort of sound, but it's I don't think it's quite what we were expecting to hear based on what the picture looks like there. All right, January 18th. So it says, I don't know which one of you is doing it, but at the end of the sonata, we shall refrain from playing Shave and Haircut. Of course, Shave and Haircut is that old tune, that dun 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 dun, that you hear at the end of cartoons and stuff like that a lot. And would not be appropriate in a sonata, which is a classical form in music. So, yeah, kind of alternate sort of. This is funny. Yeah, you put at least he's fingering and not picking, and apparently the mod doesn't understand that fingering is a musical term as well, and not something inappropriate. Allow. Oh, so I need to click allow. Okay. Yeah, that was. Yeah, that term is. Yeah, I've seen some memes. I usually refrain from posting memes that have some sort of not family friendly thing in them, but there have been a few pretty good ones that involved alternate meaning of the word fingering. But apparently the way that I have my stream chat set up, it filtered that one. Um, so. Yeah, if you were to pick behind the nut on the strings at the headstock, yeah, that would be even more shrill than just doing with your fingers. It's going to be a lot more subdued. Okay, yeah, so the orchestra here, yeah, Shave and a Haircut would not be typically what you would have at the end, although there are plenty of classical musicians that in a rehearsal will do that to be funny. Victor Borge was a great pianist and humorist who would do things like that. He'd be playing something, a very serious piece of classical music, and then throw Shave and a Haircut on the end or something like that. He'd be the kind that would do that. All right, January 19th. This one says, 3 days into his first solo attempt at scaling Mount Everest, Joel finally arrives at base camp. Okay. So, base camp, when you're climbing Mount Everest, the first camp where you would be getting ready to really climb the mountain is called base camp. Of course, it's spelled B-A-S-E because it's at the base of the mountain. From what I understand, because I read a book about Mount Everest once, you actually have to climb quite a bit just to get to base camp. So, you have to already know what you're doing even just to get that far, Of course, you want to know what you're doing if you're going to actually climb Mount Everest because it's very dangerous and requires a lot of stamina, a lot of training. The air gets very thin. But in this case, base camp is apparently for double bass players. So they have their instrument, their double bass for the orchestra, and apparently it's where you can go and practice in very cold weather. But at least you would be able to breathe okay because you wouldn't be towards the summit where the air is very thin. And you still do need to breathe as a string player. Okay, yeah, I like this one. January 20th, Mambo's number 1 through 4 were tragically lost in the destruction of the great library of Alexandria. Yeah, it's great. So, Mambo number 5, of course, that was a really popular song by Lou Bega, I think. Is that his name? Yeah. Anyway, that's the, little bit of Monica is what I need, whatever. Has all the different ladies' names in it. And it was real popular there for a little while. So numbers 1 through 4, we've always all wondered what numbers 1 through 4 were all about. And so apparently they were lost in the destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's talking about Alexandria, which is a city in Egypt. And in ancient times, there was a great library full of old scrolls, like papyrus scrolls that had, a lot of information about what they'd learned, in that culture, in that period of history. And a lot of that was lost because there was a great fire. I don't remember exactly the history. It had something to do with the military campaign, and a lot of the scrolls were lost to that fire. And so there's a lot of ancient knowledge that, we don't have any access to anymore, unless they were copied or something like that, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what's known about it, but it was a tragedy to lose a lot of that information. And apparently that included Mambo's number 1 through 4, which are no longer extant. Oh, this one's good. So, we have what looks like a classroom teacher teaching some young children. Whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the police. So, this is a song by DJ Khaled, I think is how it's said. Definitely not the sort of thing that you would be teaching to small children. Unlikely that you would have this in a elementary music class. Okay, and January 23rd, this one says, somebody once told me this bird was gonna scold me while perching on my palace bust head. I was looking kinda glum and mourning what's become of my lost love, Lenore, who is dead. So, it's a parody of All Star by Smash Mouth, right? So, somebody once told me this world was gonna roll me, etc. So this is kind of the beginning part of that song, but it is also referencing the poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, which quoth the raven nevermore, there was the lost love Lenore. I can't remember the whole story of the Raven, but I remember reading it in high school, because everybody had to. It's interesting poem, it's pretty cool, but this is the Smash Mouth mashup version. Okay. All right. Now this people of a certain age understand this one, and I'm of that age. It says, I know it's tragic. The Wi-Fi isn't working, but let me tell you a story of catastrophic proportions from my childhood. Okay. So don't know how old those in the chat are. I only have one person chatting. It looks like. But that is an audio cassette tape. Of course, audio cassette tapes, sometimes if something went wrong mechanically in whatever device, radio, cassette player that you were playing it in. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we appreciate everything you do to keep this chat going with one chatter. But in certain tape players, something went wrong, or for some reason something happened, or sometimes if you were messing with the buttons, while it was playing, you could make something mess up. And the tape would not feed correctly back onto the other reel, and it would start coming out inside of the player, or sometimes it would come outside the door if there was enough of a gap between the door and where it should close on the player. Then you would have the tape running out everywhere. Right, and in the chat here, yeah, you get a pencil out. If you get a pencil out and stick it in there, you can wind that back in. So if you're lucky, sometimes it would get so mangled that it was really hard to get it to go back. But usually, if you hadn't let it go too far, you could usually get it. Now, I have had them in the past get so knotted up that I couldn't even get them to flatten out again, and then you're in trouble. Now, you could, if you were really, ambitious, you could actually cut out a damaged portion of the tape and get a small piece of tape and tape it back together. Of course, you would lose whatever bit of audio was right there, but if it was in the lead at the beginning or the end of the tape, then you might be able to do it without destroying any of the sound. But you'd have to get pretty lucky, not to destroy it entirely. All right, just a few more of these for the month of January. Oh yes, in the 80s we knew how to party. Yes, the Megabass button. Oh yeah, yeah, the wrinkled tape. It definitely has a unique sound. I suppose you could use it in sound design. I hadn't actually done that myself, but not intentionally anyway. Yes, in the old radio Walkman, and so this is a radio Walkman. It looks like maybe also a cassette player. It's kind of hard to tell, but I think this looks like a door. Yeah, you can see it. Okay, yeah, that would be one of the reels right there. You can sort of see the round shape. So, yeah, they would often have these little buttons, Megabass or Bass Boost or different things like that, where it would increase the bass sounds, the lower tones of whatever you were listening to, and it wasn't necessarily very elegant, but it did something. Okay, now this one's confusing unless you've studied some music theory. This looks like a circle of fifths, which is a pattern that kind of guides chord progressions in music. Now, not all progressions are based on the circle of fifths, but often we have falling fifth progressions. So, for example, G is the fifth of C, so a G7 chord usually goes to a C chord, but of course it can go lots of other places too. But when we have a falling fifths progression, that kind of is the backbone of how functional harmony works. And so usually at the top you would have a C, and on one side you would have an F, and one side you would have a G, and it could be either way. And it seems like we usually have the G on the right. We would go up with adding sharps this way and down adding flats. This one's the other way around actually, where we have the falling fifths going to the right and the rising fifths going to the left. But I guess you could do it either way. It just depends on how you look at it. So E quadruple flat, that means you would go down 4 half steps from E. So that is enharmonically equivalent to C, which means it's just another way to spell the same letter. So E quadruple flat is C. And so we would expect G on one side and F on the other side. Well, E sharp is F, because F is a half step above E. And E, that's a double sharp and a single sharp. So E triple sharp, that would be 3 half steps above E, so that's G. So we have C, we have the fifth away G, and then we have the fifth below F. So we were going to go this way. The fifth below F should be B flat. Well, E is as far away from B flat as you can get, because there's a B flat on either side of it, and they would both be half an octave away, or a tritone. And so you have 6 flats. So E, go down 6 half steps, and you get to B flat. And so each one of these is equivalent to that. So on the opposite end of C, you would expect to find F sharp, because that's exactly 6 semitones away. Well, E double sharp, so 1 sharp would be F, 2 sharps would be F sharp. So yeah, this is ugly. Hopefully you never see any music that has this many flat, multiple flats and sharps on the same note, because that's icky. I wouldn't want to see that. Okay, January 27th. This one says, showing up to the gig at a bar that holds 60 people with 2 full stacks. So by full stacks, we're talking about these giant stacks of speakers. And yes, I have seen people bring way too much power to gigs. In fact, when I got my first keyboard amp, which actually you can see back here if I move this chair, that's an RD, which one is that? It's the KC500 amp. I had an RD600 keyboard with it. As KC500 amp, I believe it's no longer made. I think it's KC550 has replaced it, which maybe has a little more power, but anyway, my point is I've had that keyboard ever since I started, and I was playing in a lot of coffee shops doing jazz and stuff like that. But that thing right there, it has 150 watts of power, and that is way more than I've never ever needed for anything. And in fact, I remember once taking it to an auditorium, like the big auditorium on campus when I was in college, and it was at night. I was setting up my equipment for a rehearsal there the next day, and I decided to crank the thing up as loud as it could possibly go, and man, did it fill that auditorium. It's way more power than I've ever needed for anything, so I've never really done anything where I've had it even using like half of its, the power that it has. Because, and if I had ever needed any more than I'd used, you would probably plug it in through the sound system directly rather than using it actually to project your own sound. You might use it as a monitor so you could hear yourself while you have it plugged directly into the sound system. But yeah, I've never in and of itself needed that much power, but I have it, still do. All right, this is my second ABBA joke. I guess I had two this month. So yeah, this says Jabba or Jabba. So that's Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars. Return of the Jedi was his first appearance, and it looks like ABBA, but everybody's face is Jabba the Hutt. So there you go. And it looks like they all have like a little drool coming out of their mouth. That's kind of gross. But okay. Oh, and the last one for January. So this is it. January 31st says, "If you know why the corner is taped, you are officially old." And so I guess I'm officially old because I know very well what that means. So in the old cassette tapes, if you had a blank cassette, like one that you bought from the store, there would be a tab there where there's a little gap right here that this tape has been put on there to cover that gap. And I can't explain exactly what's happening mechanically, but there was some piece inside of the tape recorder that if there was something there, it would stop it from going in, and then that would make it to where you would be able to record over it. Now, if it was a tape that you bought from the store that already had music on it, then you would not be able to record on it, because if you tried to, that thing would go in there, and then somehow mechanically the tape recorder would know that it's not allowed to write on it. But if you had some old tape, or you had a tape that somebody gave you and you didn't really like the music, or you got tired of the music that was on there, and you just wanted to use it as a blank tape, and you could record right over it by putting that little piece of tape on there, and that way the recording machine would have no idea. It would just treat it like it was a blank tape that had the little tab on there. Now, when you bought one of those from the store that had the tab in it, and you recorded something on it, and you wanted to make sure it didn't get recorded over, then you would break the tab out, and then that way you keep it from being copied over by accident. But yeah, I don't know how it worked exactly, but I know you tried to press the record button down, and that thing wasn't there. You couldn't even get the button to go all the way down. So I don't know how it worked exactly, but that tape would allow you to tape over anything. And I remember my mother had a bunch of tapes from Amway, which I'm not exactly sure what it was, to tell you the truth. Some sort of sales thing, sales and marketing sort of thing, that a bunch of people had those tapes, like way back in the day. And my mom had a bunch of them, and she would give them to me and my siblings, and we would put tape on them, we'd record over them, we'd make up our own little skits, or we'd sing songs, or do all kinds of crazy stuff. So, and I think those tapes still exist somewhere. They're probably really embarrassing, but I think we still have them. We just put a little piece of tape over them and on the thing to record it, and then put a new label on it or something, or wrote over it with a marker so we'd know that it was something other than what the tape actually said on it. So anyway, that's the SamuelStokesMusic.com Facebook page memes for this month. I'm going to try to do this at the end of every month. So I know we're into February now, but I just thought about trying this. So at the end of February, or maybe at the beginning of March, then I'll go through and do all of February. So hope to see you then. Have a good night.